Hello, welcome everyone. My name's Anthony Coles. Thank you for joining us. We're still going to be letting people in the background. I will just pass over to ACBC President David Olsen to do a quick introduction.
Thank you, Anthony, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this update on ACBC's Green Channel Initiative and Australia's green economic future with China. Today's session is hosted by the Australia-China Business Council and supported by the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations. Before we begin our proceedings, on behalf of those joining the webinar from around Australia and internationally, I'd like to acknowledge that the webinar is being hosted from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Indigenous Australians who are joining us today. I also acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of the various lands upon which we work today. I'd like to welcome all members and friends of the ACBC and thank you for joining this event, which will reflect on what I think is one of the hottest topics of the day, Australia's green economic future with China. We're delighted to be able to welcome 5 highly qualified speakers to present their views and engage in a conversation about this topic. They are Peter Tsai, the CEO of the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations, Anthony Coles, who leads our Green Channel Initiative, and who'll be our moderator for today. Anthony, in fact, is just joining us from Bangkok, where he's been speaking at a UN climate event. Claire Rogers, Partner and Head of Climate and ESG at King & Wood Mallesons, and co-lead author of the Climate Collaborations Report that you will hear about more shortly. Li Shi from the Association of Green Industrial Parks in Beijing. And Li Shi joins us on short notice. She's standing in for Secretary General Maggie Song, who unfortunately was called away to another meeting urgently earlier today. And finally, Lynn Morrison, partner at EY in Sydney, who has a focus on energy, infrastructure, construction and technology sectors. Now, before I hand back to Anthony to moderate the session, a short word on why we're here today. ACBC members will be aware that 18 months or so ago, we launched our Green Channel Initiative, which was a multi-year program designed to highlight to Australian business and government the economic opportunities from greater collaboration with China on the climate challenge. Our activities are focused on 2 key areas, insights and action. Insights are designed to bridge the gap in market understanding of those opportunities. And we've done that through a range of events, podcasts and thought leadership. And action. Action is designed to bridge the gap in engagement and to create the partnerships in new market areas. Our Green Economy Business Delegation that we led to China in April of this year is a great example of that. It was the first senior level business delegation from Australia to China in nearly 4 years, and it's paved the way for some very important discussions and cemented a whole range of partnerships. We've reinforced our relationships with Austrade, with the AusChams throughout Greater China, and importantly, with our new MOU partner, the Association of Green Industrial Parks. Following that visit, we prepared a detailed report of our findings and recommendations, which we presented to the Foreign Minister and the Trade Minister. From discussions that we've had since then with DFAT, I know that those recommendations have been considered at the highest levels within government and at the ministerial level. Then supporting us on this journey and being with us as a true partner all the way has been the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations. A grant provided last year enabled ACBC to expand the program through a series of roundtables and events around the country and internationally. We've had industry-focused seminars, sister state province roundtables, decarbonisation roundtables, and high-level CEO roundtables. And of course, last year we had our major event where we launched our collaborations report, Canberra Networking Day. And I'm delighted to report that that'll be held again this year on the 18th of October. More of that later. The funding from the foundation has allowed ACBC to create a whole new way of looking at the relationship with China through the lens of collaboration to resolve a global shared problem, climate change. But enough of that as an introduction. It's now my pleasure to welcome Peter Tsai, the National Foundation's eminent CEO, to make a few introductory remarks. And following that, Anthony Coles will take over once again to moderate the session. Thank you.
Peter, we're waiting.
There we go.
All right. Sorry about that. David, thank you for your very generous introduction. Let me begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. The traditional custodians were the first explorers, navigators, innovators, farmers, engineers, astronomers, artists, and diplomats on this continent. And as many have noted, we can learn a lot from the traditional land and water management practices. But with the work of the group like Australia-China Business Council, we can be optimistic. I'm looking forward to hearing insights today on how Australia and China can ensure the streams are flowing and the mountains are lush. The foundation is very proud to support ACBC's Green Channel. The channel has been an overarching framework to elevate engagement with China on trade investment opportunities in support of clean energy transition. From its podcast series through to its climate challenge report with Kingwood Mallesons and numerous roundtables across Australia, the channel has identified areas ripe for collaboration. For example, ACBC has presented Brisbane's Olympic Game as an opportunity to learn from Beijing's 2022 Winter Games, where all the venues were powered by renewable energy for the first time in the game's history. Also note, ACBC has established a partnership with the Green Parks Association in China. This is an important framework to support market access opportunities for Australian businesses into China's green parks. And I'm delighted, Maggie, no longer able to join us, but someone from the Green Park Association will be speaking later on this call. I was also excited to be on this call because I have recently returned from China, where I participated in the climate change roundtable in the beautiful city of Chengdu. I was struck by the drive of the Chinese academics and a business leader to find a new solution to pressing climate change issues. For example, I heard from Professor Zhu from China's Southwest Jiao Tong Universities on the application of bamboo in construction, not just around potential scaffolding, but also mixed in with cement for permanent building structures. At Tsinghua University, I heard from Professor Li, who had extensive knowledge of Australia's potential to turn agriculture waste into biomasses. He had quite extensive collaboration with the QUT in Brisbane, and also even worked on a project for Queensland government. So it's just very interesting discussion. And also, I was also struck me the most was just the boom in EV in China. The last time I was in China was in 2019. I still remember the streets of Beijing were packed with the German black Audis. But this time around, the road were packed with green number plated Chinese vehicles. The Chinese consumers were proudly showing off their green plates on the latest BYDs and the Geely cars. As many of you know, China now is the world's largest EV market, accounting for 60% of the global EV sales. The climate change webinar comes at an important time. Australia and China continue the path of stabilizing our bilateral relationship. Australia and China can work together to help each other reach our respective net zero goals. For Australia to reach net zero by 2050, for China to achieve its double carbon goals of a peaking carbon emission by 2030 and achieving net zero by 2060. There's scope for Australia and China to work together on climate change where it is aligned with our national interest. Australia's Trade Minister Don Farrell and the Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao have discussed opportunities for climate change cooperation. The Australia-China Foreign Strategic Dialogue Joint Outcome Statement from 21st December 2022 highlighting the intention to recommence dialogue in climate change cooperation. And in opening remarks at a bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Anthony Albanese And the President Xi in Bali, the Prime Minister spoke about the significance of climate change as a global challenge. And on our trade complementarity, we'll create opportunities, especially in hard-to-abate industries. As an example, over 70% of Australia's iron ore exports are to China, and Australia and China have a shared interest in green steel development, removing carbon emission from steel through the supply chains and the production cycle. I look forward to learning more about other opportunities in decarbonisation collaboration through your insights today. Before I conclude, let me provide you with a snapshot of the foundation. We were established by the Australian government back in 2020 as a national platform that promotes constructive and practical engagement across business, government, and community. And the foundation builds on 40-year legacy of our glorious ancestor, the Australia-China Council, established back in 1978. As this is a major initiative of the federal government, the foundation represents the significant investment in the bilateral relationship by the government. To date, the foundation has provided around $20 million in funding, over 130 grants to deepen and diversify bilateral engagement in mutually beneficial ways. And the 15% of the funding has been spent on 12 climate change projects, including ACBC's Green Channel. So just let me briefly touch on some of the climate change projects. The first one is Australia National University is working with the Tsinghua University and the Institute of China's National Development and Reform Commission on low carbon transition. Research under phase 2 of the project focus on decarbonisation in hard-to-abate industries, including green steel. ANU has run numerous decarbonisation workshops with ACBC across Australia. Participating in a decarbonisation workshop in Perth last year under the project. I was really impressed by the calibre of the speaker, including, I think, the current Premier of Western Australia, Minister Roger Cook. And also senior executives from Rio Tinto's FMG and their Chinese counterparts. And also, I have booked my ticket for the next reiteration in Perth next week, and focusing on green steel, green hydrogen, and the downstream critical mineral processing. And the Victoria University in Melbourne is working with China's Northwest Agriculture, Forest University, and the Shandong Institute of Petroleum and Chemical Engineering Technology to explore seaweed originated polymer as a substitute for synthetic plastics. This was Minister Wang's favorite project that's highlighted by announcing federal government grants focused on North Asia projects. If researcher can identify a viable alternative to synthetic plastics, just imagine the impact that we have on the packaging and waste management. And last but not least, the Melbourne Centre for Cities is running executive training and dialogue projects to strengthen climate change and collaborations between cities across Australia and China. And Australia and China share over 100 sister and state relationship, and the city government are at the forefront of climate action. I was in Melbourne for the workshop, and came away energized by the representatives' commitment to solving mitigations, challenges at a city level. And I personally received emails from my home state of South Australia's officials from city, I think of Uncle Pringle Hill. They want to get in touch with their colleagues from Guangzhou to swap notes around energy efficient buildings. I was very heartened by that. And it was wonderful to see officials participate from cities really across Australia, from Perth, Hobart, Guiyang, and Guangzhou. And just last month, the second cohort graduated with an excellent in-person workshop in Hong Kong and hosted by our Consul General there. So looking forward, climate change will remain a top priority for the Foundation. There are great opportunities for climate change collaboration, and I look forward to hearing your insights as leaders in energy and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Fantastic summary, and fantastic to see you heading to Perth again next week with the Decarbonisation Forum again, almost 12 months to the date from last year, covering that in a minute. Thank you again, everyone at the Foundation, for your support, and we look forward to working with you on the outcomes from some of the programs that we'll be outlining here. Just need to... So I'm going to actually summarise the why, firstly, behind the Green Channel program, and provide a bit of a context to then the what, the deliverables within the last year that we've been able to achieve with the support of the Foundation and also our members and corporate partners. This is an image from last month with the terrible floods that hit northern China. And what was obvious, again, was that there was an increased level of preparation from the Chinese government for it, but also a lot of parallels with what we have been through ourselves here, and also other parts of the world are experiencing the dynamics of an increasing biosphere. This image is actually from 12 months ago, August last year, when a heat wave hit China, which also adversely affected the city of Chengdu, Peter, actually. So the droughts had a huge impact on the large hydropower supply, and then the unfortunate response to that has been an increase in investment in coal generation capacity. At the same time, mind you, China has also increased and delivered more renewable energy generation additions in 2022 and mostly in 2023 than they have in the past, and it's now exceeded their fossil fuel generation. This is the challenge that we're in at the moment, and this is really highlighted by what is a shared emissions problem. If you look at the figures on the right, these are the gigaton gaps between our pledges, our country pledges, and the target for us to achieve emissions reductions. And everyone is missing these. And when you look at China's challenge, they're having to convert from a predominantly fossil fuel energy mix to also maintain the growth in their economy, but to transition to a non-fossil fuel industry. The challenge for China is even more pronounced when you look at the scale of their emissions and I guess the pathway to net zero for them. And so what we identified in the last 18 months with our conversations was that there's a huge challenge and they're reaching out and they're asking for help. And so Australia has a lot of opportunities to contribute to that. However, Australia itself has an emissions problem in that we need to do more to achieve our targets, albeit at a lower level. We still have a reliance within industry and our energy generation. This then reflects on our exports problem. Australia is exporting coal and gas to China, Japan, a major export resource. However, our requirements to meet our nationally determined contributions requires those outputs to be reduced. When we look at the bilateral relationship between Australia and China, obviously the ACBC is recognising the strength of this bilateral relationship, as does the federal government. However, China's role in global GDP is set to maintain and increase in the next 10 to 20 years. And we have, as Peter mentioned, grown our relationship with China on the back of our resources. However, a lot of our other services and agricultural exports as a share of our exports has declined. And so when we look at the green economy context across more than just the climate challenge, we see opportunities in all these sectors for collaboration and relationship between Australia and China. One of the key challenges in Australia that we included in our roundtable presentations around the country was the economic complexity challenge where other countries are advancing their manufacturing capacity and involving R&D and investment in those supply chain areas. And Australia needs to consider that in some of its focus on its industry development. And when we talked with China, and this is from an IEA report, they're already and consistently still collaborating on patenting technologies relating to the mitigation of climate change with other countries. And we want to maintain and increase Australia's participation in this. Our challenge at the moment is that we're promoting ourselves as a renewable energy superpower, and at the same time increasing our investments in coal and gas. And this is having a challenge in the region and in Australia's global reputation about how we maintain our integrity in this transition to a green economy. ACBC has also experienced, and part of the drive behind this green channel was the challenges back in 2019 and 2020 in that relationship with China. However, that has started to turn back around the other way, and we feel that in focusing on the green economy and the opportunities in this area. In our board strategy paper back 2 years ago when we put this together, we also recognise we have a share of voice challenge. There's a $10 million budget going into ASPI at the moment, which is providing a narrative which is driving a lot of that poll. And we feel that the economic opportunities with our biggest trading partner needs to be reinforced. Australia also engaged in a green economy agreement with Singapore 2 years ago. It's starting to get execution now. And just recently, as last month, held a Decarbonising Australia Business Summit. And from ACBC's point of view, these were some of the drivers for us raising the profile of the relationship and opportunities with China around the green economy. And many in Australia wouldn't be aware of and understand the accessibility of what China is doing. And this is an English language version publication of their green development focus and all of the strategies laid out there. And we feel that there isn't enough embrace and engagement and debate about this. And obviously, with a lot of people not being able to access WeChat, very unlikely many would have access the publications of these policies and these developments across provinces in China. And we feel that we have a role to play in increasing that understanding and consideration within the strategy development in Australia, because other countries are. EU, Japan, Korea, ASEAN, the UK, and even our friends in the US are all engaging with China at very large levels, more than us. And we've been pushing for this engagement and trying to work with the Australian government on improving, and part of our recommendations is to support that. We see a tremendous opportunity within the region for Australia to participate in what's happening within this regional comprehensive economic partnership, and Australia to consider Japan, Korea, China, as well as ASEAN and Australia's role in that region. As Peter mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of re-injection of investment in support in aid and support in the region, and great to see climate being a part of that. So that's the why, and this is the what. ACBC is really about delivering insights and actions that can help our advocacy and our work with the government. And so December of 2021, we held a first roundtable forum with industry leaders and state-owned entities talking about the pressures of decarbonisation on those businesses. And it was through this event that we heard firsthand their commitment to activities in Australia in decarbonising their businesses. So at that time, we launched in partnership with Kingwood Mallison's research activity, which Claire will cover off shortly, looking at the economic opportunities in 6 key industry areas where Australia and China have complementarities and certainly areas of strengths that we could collaborate together on. We started guiding this discussion within our industry forums, and back in May 2022 held a agribusiness summit, which has just been held again in June this year, which had some tremendous insights from the Chinese industry associations and looking at opportunities with Australia. As Peter mentioned, through the support of the foundation, ACBC was able to go to market to increase the awareness of this program, and we produced a podcast series from some of the content within the report, which is accessible if you're quick enough to scan that. But it also allowed us to improve our engagement at a national level. We launched the program at our Canberra Networking Day in Canberra in September, and held a number of really breakthrough forums with industry leaders in Australia about these opportunities. And coming up to 12 months on that, and the next Canberra Networking Day in October this year, we are going to be looking at the what next for that. We also held a closed-door roundtable with government department representatives and leaders of industry, and discussed the opportunities and the friction points in some of these areas of trade and investment, and have maintained and continued a very collaborative relationship with the government. As Peter mentioned, partnering also with the Australian National University with a series of decarbonisation roundtable forums. But at the same time, in those markets, we were able to brief the trade and investment departments within government, and also have briefings directly with industry partners around the Green Channel opportunities. We got access to global leaders in insights, and yes, the then Deputy Premier, now Premier, very supportive of ACBC's engagement with China, and that event's on again next week. In Canberra, a tremendously well-attended event in Canberra, and we also added to that some site visits to some of the initiatives that have been delivered in ACT, and increased those collaborations with the universities. In Queensland, again, we had some briefings with the Queensland government, particularly, as Peter mentioned, around the opportunities with the Olympic Games, and in all of those areas that they're focusing on for their renewable energy transition are all areas also requiring infrastructure for the Games. And this is a huge opportunity for Australia to learn from the experience in China, but also the speed and pace of that transition. In December 2022, we partnered with Austrade to launch their a market briefing summarising the Australian products and services in this sector, and really well attended from both the China side and Australian business side. We held the second of our decarbonisation forums within that mining resources sector, and some tremendous support again from industry and academics within China that highlighted the desire for collaboration, the opportunities to work together. And I'll make a few comments about the Rio activities in a moment. It was also really fantastic to have all through this last 18 months the tremendous support from DFAT and the embassy and consulates in China, and their participation at our events really helped recognition on the China side of the enthusiasm and intention behind this collaboration. Dropping in another ad for the podcast series if you didn't get to scan it before, but really a great opportunity for us to share the depth of the content within that report, and an easy way to access that. In each of the main areas of those industry sectors within the report, we've been holding industry forums and government briefings. An EV and battery forum in Victoria was really well attended, and again held another one this year. In South Australia, we brought in some of the leading infrastructure players in the transmission sector, power generation and industry, and had briefings with the Shandong government about their activities in this region. It also created an opportunity for the Premier to meet with the consulate there. And we had a closed-door briefing about the opportunities for collaboration, and subsequently signed an MOU with the China Chamber of Commerce in Australia, with the Department of Trade and Investment witnessing that. The ambassador from China to Australia has been really supportive of this initiative. And the gentleman on the left there is actually the representative from the Ministry of Science and Technology for the People's Republic of China based in Australia. And their interest in our report and the work that we've been doing was reflected with some of the invitations that we were provided with on the China side for our delegation. We've had further roundtables and involvement from industry partners and close friends of ACBC, such as Alibaba, who really highlighted the depth of China's corporate area in ESG commitments, but also in the transition of their business and upstream and downstream influences on their business. A huge business and a lot of areas of opportunity for Australia. On the advocacy front, meeting with governors and Minister Wong and Farrell and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to summarise the findings from the last 12 months with some recommendations, which I'll wrap up the presentation on in the last slide. As I mentioned before, one of the key challenges of our disengagement was a lack of understanding about what China was doing and what we could be doing with China. And so one of the key areas of opportunity from the Foundation's support for ACBC with the Green Channel was our participation in climate and energy related forums. David presented to 1,000 attendees at the Impact X conference as a keynote presenter in the opening session, which I was there looking around at a few dumbfounded faces. However, once they understood what we were sharing and what we were talking about, the conversations in the panels after was really enthusiastic and inquisitive. We were again able to present and participate in the China side of this conference, which then provided us with opportunities to introduce Australian companies in China to present, such as Coles, who have a tremendous footprint on the China side, and we facilitated their involvement in panel sessions as well to increase the collaboration opportunities between China and Australia. We've presented at other industry forums. This all has brought attention in other areas, provided briefings with the China Council for CCPIT and the China Chamber for International Commerce, and also the Ministry of Science and Technology in China, which was a result of that briefing from Australian ambassador to the China side. As I touched on briefly, Rio Tinto and Tsinghua have been a huge leader in this collaboration already for 10 years now, and they just published this report late last year, which is a summary of the strategy and the path forward, which has a huge amount of content in there, which should be required reading for all of the supply chain in the mining and resources sector. Because what they've mapped out is all of the areas that they're going to look at, where the policy is going and where the cooperation and exchanges are going to be. It's all there. And what we need to understand is how we fit into this. And so I was able to attend and present at a Hydrogen Energy Forum in Beijing earlier, where they actually have very clear levers for policy development for supply side and demand side, and very enthusiastic in the involvement of Australian companies in that. And so on the Australia side, in trying to accelerate that, we've worked with innovation ecosystems such as Investable VC and the Greenhouse and City of Sydney Climate Tech Hub and just tried to communicate the scale of the transition that's going to happen there, when you can see from coal and oil and gas and the growth in hydro, wind, biomass, nuclear. And so this is opportunities for Australia. However, we're disengaged from the collaboration side. And so all of these areas are areas where China now basically leads the world in technology, patents, and advanced development of that industry. And we actually need to lean in more to engage with this. The area of RCEP was covered off in our report and also with our recommendations to the ministers, and gave some great opportunities for engagement in our region. The Green Channel also gave us the opportunity to have an inaugural board meeting with our chamber partners on the mainland side, and to talk about improving the opportunities for outcomes for Australian companies in entering the market, and also working out opportunities and securing the landing of those interests for projects in Australia. With the delegation into China in April, we received high-level briefings from government departments. We had a number of functions which were first-time connections for people for a number of years between Australia and China, and also did a number of site visits to these new science and innovation parks that are demonstrating the industrial transformation happening in China. As Li Shi will cover off in a moment, we were delighted to be able to meet in person and secure the MOU there with the Association of Green Industrial Parks in China, and then hopped on a train over to Tianjin to go and visit one of the main industrial parks over there, the Tianjin Economic Technology Development Zone. And just before I close up, I just wanted to highlight the eye-opening moments of these delegations, where you get to see a city outline all of the business and the policy development and the business opportunities for collaboration. And these are the areas that we feel that Australia needs to activate more. To summarise that delegation, one of the delegates was a New Colombo Plan scholar, Carol, and we asked her a question to sum up what her observations from the delegation were, and it was really profound for a first-time visitor to mainland China, and really it was just obvious that the scale of the transition up there is huge, and they don't really know what we have to offer in this area because of that disengagement. And Australia doesn't know what China needs and where we can be of help. So this is where we want to set the foundation for where we take the Green Channel moving forward. And so as part of the actions there, the recommendations in our briefing to the ministers was a need to really do a formal gap analysis report of what that understanding is of where China's going and what where we can work together. We feel there needs to be more industry sector focused in-market immersions and the opportunity discovery, like we did with that first delegation in April. And it needs to remove the silos between industry, academia and government departments. This Team Australia approach within these industry sectors that are identified as needing help and are economic opportunities for Australia as defined in Action Point 1. We also want to see some action on the Green Economy Framework Agreement. A couple of years now that we've been tapping the table, and we are working very closely with DFAT and the other departments on this, and it's really enthusiastic support. However, we can see a lot of other countries well ahead of us already, and we've got a lot of work to be done. We also feel that the need for a new platform for this cross-border collaboration around a research institute, similar to what Tsinghua and Rio have done, but looking at those industry sectors within the report that are all providing opportunities for collaboration. As you'll hear from Li Xi's presentation, we feel there's huge opportunities for green economic zone collaborations beyond renewable energy zones and isolated industrial parks. A coordinated national level market entry strategy, because as you'll hear on the China side, the way that companies need to go into China and what they do to contribute to China's high quality growth agenda needs to be considered. And there's a number of opportunities for joint research and investment cooperation, but it requires a framework. What is possible and where do we work together? Because otherwise it's going to be very inefficient. We also feel that we need to focus more on this engagement within the climate tech investment commercialization, and there needs to be a framework for what's possible there. As I touched on briefly, we feel that the regional comprehensive economic partnership, which involves Japan, Korea and China, is our opportunity to leverage our current China Plus strategy and partner with those ASEAN nations to make sure that Australia doesn't miss out on that supply chain growth that's happening in that region. And we feel that we should be identifying areas where we should accelerate trials in Australia to facilitate the acceleration of this green economy transition, to actually be a leader, to say, look, come over here and do that here, because we are going to provide the environment for you to test that out at a scale level because of our renewable energy generation activity here. So as you can see, the what we've been doing, driven by the why, is now providing us with a path forward, which is part of the questions that I put to the speakers coming after, and also what we'll be covering off in the panel. But now I'll just wrap up my summary of the Green Channel program, thanking again the Foundation and ACBC's national corporate partners who have been a really strong support of this, and pass over to the Green Association of Industrial Parks in China.
Oh yeah, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, David, Anthony, for your wonderful presentation on what the Green Channel has done. Greetings from Beijing here. My name is Li Xi, and I'm the coordinator of international affairs from the Green Partnership of Industrial Parks in China, GPIPC. It is a great pleasure to be invited by ACBC Green Channel's event today as one of the cooperative partners. And we are very sorry that Maggie Song, our Director General, was not able to attend in person today. And she would like me to represent her to introduce the green economy opportunities between Australia and China, and especially within the industrial clusters in China. So we all know the world is united in addressing climate change, and Australian groups are here to discuss partnering with China for a net zero future. GPIPC has advocated for environmental friendly and sustainable growth in China's industrial parks for more than 10 years. And I am very delightful about representing GPIPC to encourage further collaboration between Chinese and Australian governments, industrial parks and companies for a greener future in both countries. So today I will update you on the green progress China's economic zones have made, and I believe it can help Australian business to find new chances. So first of all, I would like to introduce you the number of categories of the industrial parks in China. The establishment of industrial parks was a significant action and a successful mode of China's reform and opening up. So far, there are over 2,500 provincial level development zones, 230 national level development zones, as well as 168 national high-tech zones. Over the past 40 years, China's industrial parks have undergone significant changes. In 1984, China established the first batch of development zones in 14 coastal cities to attract foreign investments. Some of these zones were once salt marshes or barren land in rural areas, but now they have become important drivers of China's economic growth, as well as ecologically sustainable and livable industrial clusters. So we can take a look at the really impressive contributions made by national level development zones, as shown by the data. According to MOFCOM, as of 2021, the regional GDP created by 230 national development zones accounted for 11% of China's total GDP, despite occupying only 0.3% of the country's land area. Additionally, these zones have utilized foreign capital and conducted import and export export activities at rates of 22% and 22.8% respectively of that of the entire country. So it is really obvious and easy to conclude that these zones have the most dynamic and robust economic performance in the country. Not only these development zones excel in economic performance, but they have also led the way in low carbon and sustainable development, in close alignment with China's national policies. So over the past 2 decades, they have been highly competitive in establishing eco-industrial parks, green parks, low carbon demonstration zones, and been highly competitive in establishing in all those industrial zones which have been certificated by the national ministries. A prime example of this is TEDA, Tianjin Economic and Technological Development Area, which has been awarded all relevant national certificates for industrial parks. So as an organization who has its headquarters and started its journey in TEDA, GPIBC is immensely proud of the contribution we have made to help TEDA to achieve these progress. It is also our pleasure to help ACBC liaise with TEDA to have the visit in April. In addition, as one of the founding members of the Global Alliance for Special Economic Zones, an initiative which is started by the UNCTAD, we have nominated the development zones in Guangzhou, Tianjin, Hefei, Suzhou, and Qingdao to be listed in the SDG Model Zone Award. So GPIBC has published the 2021 Green Development Report on National Development Zones, and I wanted to share some of our most interesting findings with you. So firstly, we gathered data on the clean energy consumption of national development zones and the green electricity consumption quota of the provinces in which they are located. As you can see from the two maps, 48 development zones utilize between 75% to 100% clean energy, while 35 development zones utilize between 50% to 75% clean energy. The other map shows that the provinces within darker colors have a higher supply capacity for green electricity. And in addition, numerous development zones have implemented policies and subsidies to encourage companies within their zones to participate in green and low carbon initiatives. And for example, also TEDA. TEDA is among the pioneer development zones that have invested 100 million RMB annually to subsidize 30 projects related to energy savings and emission reductions. And moreover, several industrial parks have adopted digitalized management systems, including platforms for smart energy management, environmental monitoring, and safety monitoring to achieve more sophisticated management and promote green development. So based on the information presented in the 3 slides above, you can identify that development zones, where we say industrial clusters that offer then really attractive and green business environments to investors. And what's more, it is also crucial to share the info of international cooperation parks, which are located in various parts of China. MOFCOM has set up 8 international ecological cooperation parks since 10 years ago, and all of which are committed to sustainable development. With the support from provincial governments, there are now more than 80 parks distributed throughout China, and these parks are really eager to cooperate with more foreign companies. And by the way, on September the 8th, in partnership with the Foreign Investment Administration of MOFCOM, GPIBC is going to host the 2023 International Cooperation Park Construction Seminar at the 23rd China International Fair for Investment and Trade in Xiamen, Fujian province. So if you are interested in connecting with authorities of commercial departments from different provinces and the local authorities of development zones, as well as international cooperation parks, you are very welcome to contact us for participation. Finally, GPIBC has also been conducting investigations into the implementation of dual carbon goals in various development zones. We have attended a seminar to discuss the construction of Suzhou Industrial Park's net zero demonstration area, which serves as a really perfect example of this initiative. In addition to, as you can see from the slide, in addition to the adjustment of industrial structure and optimization of energy structure, a large number of green technologies are required in the fields of urban construction and operation, low carbon transportation, as well as sustainable living. Therefore, it is expected that the advanced modes of and technologies of Australian companies will have a really significant impact on the green development of industrial parks. So at the end of my presentation, please allow me to introduce GPIBC. Under the guidance and support of MOFCOM, GPIBC's main role is to help industrial parks in China at all levels to facilitate green transition and international cooperation. We sincerely welcome more Australian companies to work together with GPIBC to explore more cooperation opportunities within Chinese development clusters. And also we sincerely look forward to conduct more cooperation with ACBC in the future. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Li Shi, and a wonderful presentation. And thank you very much for stepping in at such short notice to present. And as you can see, there's a tremendous amount of willingness and interest in collaboration, and we certainly felt that when we attended the TEDA in Tianjin in April. And part of our recommendations moving forward are about how we structure that to be more efficient, because it's all good and well for people to jump on a plane and head in, but if it's not done within a structure or it's not done within a coordinated program, we feel that there'll be inefficiencies in that engagement. And so that's certainly something that we want to work with the Green Parks Association and with federal, state governments, trade investment commissions to work on. Thank you again. I'll now ask for Claire Rogers from King Wood Mallisons to join us if she can. Claire was a huge supporter of pulling together the content within the original collaborations report. We scared each other. Every time we see each other, we scare each other by saying, oh, the next one needs to come out. However, what it did was, it provided a great opportunity for collaboration between Australia and China on these industry areas. And then we had the tremendous opportunity to bring that together with the editorial team and bring that down into key insights and recommendations within those 6 industry sectors. Claire, over to you.
Thanks very much, Anthony. It was certainly a journey creating the report, but it really did highlight the opportunities that exist for collaboration. And that was really what I wanted to briefly speak about today, sort of 2 key areas where, I think Australia and China are both really facing the same challenges. And it's quite obvious, certainly to me, and I'm sure everyone on this call, therefore, the opportunities that exist for Australia and China to collaborate in this space. And the first one of those is in relation to energy. And Anthony, you mentioned in your introduction the enormous take-up of renewable energy in China. So China now has, this is from the Global Energy Monitor report for the first quarter of the year, China's utility scale solar capacity has reached 228 gigawatts, which is more than the rest of the world combined. And it's also doubled its wind capacity from 2017 levels to more than 310 gigawatts. The report attributes this to a range of factors, but a lot of that really centres around government initiatives, both in terms of subsidies and encouraging investment in the space, and also putting pressure on the provincial governance and the generating companies in relation to developing that renewable power. Now, my day job when I'm not doing all things climate and ESG is actually the development of projects, and in particular renewable energy. And in Australia this year, we have not reached completion on one, and that's not we as a firm, that is we as a country have not completed one new renewable project. When you look at what is required for Australia to meet its goals, which Anthony is taking you through, we cannot afford to have what we have at the moment, which is a period where we cannot get completion of these projects. Now, there's a lot of different factors that feed into that. And, one of them, and this is a challenge that we share with China, is in relation to the nature of the grid infrastructure and the transmission infrastructure that we have. So in China, most of their generation capacity, both renewable and coal as it happens, is on the west coast, which is more sparsely inhabited. And obviously then all the load that is required actually needs to be in the higher density east coast areas. We've got the same challenge in Australia. We've got a very, very long linear transmission system that goes up the east coast. Actually, where our renewable resource is, it's all inland, obviously, in regional areas, and therefore we need to build out our transmission system to enable the connection of that renewable generation. So we're actually really facing the same sort of challenges as between Australia and China in terms of getting projects done. The other piece is, of course, and I think it's been mentioned, China is the world's largest manufacturer of solar PV. One of the reasons we are not getting to, and obviously they also a lot of wind turbine development as well, one of the reasons we're not managing to close any projects in Australia at the moment is supply chain issues. It's pretty obvious when you look at a map where Australia sits in the world, and we sit at the end of the supply chain for everyone globally. It doesn't matter where you're coming from, we are the last stop. And what that means is we are competing with the rest of the world at the moment because everyone is looking to build out their renewable energy capacity. So everyone is looking for the same pieces of technology and equipment. And it is hard for us to compete in Australia, and we need to be realistic about that. And therefore, we need to look at how we can build those relationships and manage that cooperation so that we actually can get that generation being built. Because at the moment, I'm certainly encouraging people to invest in their own solar panels and batteries because it's very hard to see how the lights don't go out because we're not making the progress that we need to. And I really think there's quite a lot we can learn from China in that regard, and a lot of opportunities for collaboration and development in terms of how that is developed and how we build out our transmission system. Also, because of the nature of our energy system, energy storage is a really key aspect for both China and Australia, and again, it's been talked about in the context, we've talked about electric vehicles, what batteries mean, that's a really big focus for both countries, and of course, hydrogen, and where hydrogen can really sort of fit into the mix. And if the technology gets there, we hope it does, the kind of game-changing opportunity that presents, because it actually then allows you to store that energy that is generated away from where you need it, so that you can export it both from an Australian perspective overseas, but also to those markets where it actually is required, without losing the energy you do at the moment with sort of very long stringy transmission systems. So I think, you know, Australia, we're just so many challenges for us at the moment. To try and tackle that on our own just sort of really makes very little sense to me. The other area that I think, you know, we're sort of seeing more and more come to the fore and more discussion around, and again, where working with China just to me is a really obvious choice, is in relation to the development of the carbon markets. So, you know, China is now the world's largest carbon market. They have both a voluntary and a mandatory market, actually sort of similar to Australia. The thing that I always come back to when you start talking about carbon markets and carbon offsetting, the whole point is that a ton of carbon taken out of the atmosphere, it does not matter where it is taken out of the atmosphere. The point is it's taken out because we all just share the same atmosphere. So ultimately moving to a scenario where you have a global market for carbon, and so that you are taking carbon out at the fastest rate and the most economically efficient way possible, again, has to be the logical way forward in this regard. And, you know, we've just very recently seen Anthony Albanese was up in Vietnam, and he's signed a deal with Vietnam to assist Vietnam in developing their carbon market in terms of looking at transparency and ensuring, you know, there's a lot of issues around carbon markets and carbon units, and ensuring the veracity of those units and the systems around them. But, you know, so there's quite a significant investment with Vietnam to help them develop those markets. Again, I think there's opportunities for similar things in China, because one of the things that's definitely becoming apparent to everyone is that in the context of the Australian market, where you've got pretty much all of the large corporates now, and actually quite a lot of the smaller corporates, ourselves included, making commitments around net zero, well, that relies on carbon units, and we will not be able to generate the required number of carbon offsets just within Australia. So we really have a vested interest in helping other countries within the region set up systems where they can generate those carbon units, and those carbon units are, you know, high quality, verified, because we're all interested in actually making sure that those carbon units are doing the job that we're looking to have them meet. And then there's a lot of opportunities around that in terms of the way those units are traded and financed, and again, working not just with Australia and China, but also other countries in the region, because Asia is actually an incredible opportunity when it comes to generating those really high quality units, because of the opportunities here for sequestering that carbon and taking that out of the atmosphere. So really enormous opportunities there. And to me, that, Anthony, it's just, if we don't do this together with the region, I just don't think we're going to get there and achieve what we've set out to do. And it's just such an obvious sort of area for opportunity. So they were kind of the two key things that I wanted to flag today. I could also talk about resources and those sort of things, but I think it's really the energy and the offsets where there's that obvious opportunity.
Fantastic. Thanks, Claire. And I'll come back to probably the next step on that in the panel session. But yeah, really the opportunities, when you look at the magnitude of the scale of renewable energy transition, the need for panels, wind turbines, batteries, etc. The challenge is that we seem to have disregarded our capacity or ability to participate in any of that, and focusing on the digging it and shipping it. However, I'm in Thailand at the moment, and to your second point, all of the discussion was around how to improve, and that Australian participation in Vietnam was discussed. The measurement, verification, and reporting side of creating real projects that are sequestering carbon as opposed to just giving people permission to emit. So great. Thank you again. And thank you for your team and yourself for all of the effort that you put into this program as well with us. It's been fantastic, and we'll come back to you in the panel in a second. I'd now love to pass over to Lynn Morrison from EY. EY have pushed out a number of reports about Australia's opportunities in this sector, not just in the energy sector or in the critical minerals, but very much about the requirements for a transition to a net zero world. And really delighted to have Lynn join us today to share some of her insights in her observations of what herself and her firm have been doing in this area. Over to you, Lynn.
Thank you. Thanks, Anthony. What I'll do is I just gonna put. Please let me know if you can see the slides.
Yes.
Yeah, that works. Okay, great. Well, so good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to acknowledge that the traditional owner and custodians of land that we walk and meet today. Pay my respect to the elders, both past and present, and to the emerging community leaders. I also acknowledge the important roles that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that we work with in the community. I'm a partner at EY, as Anthony introduced. I have been in the professional service industry for over 20 years in the past, and been working with clean energy businesses probably since 2010, if I reflect properly. So my interest and passion in this sector has been ever growing, along with the progress made by countries, the business and the community on the energy transition and that decarbonization journey. I really want to start by thanking the ACBC and also the Foundation for all your leadership and the efforts on the Australian-China relationship, but also the two countries I love, being who I am, and also on the initiatives that you're driving. And congratulations on the report as well, that joint report announced by ACBC and Kiwa Medicine on climate change. Certainly, I think it's a really good comprehensive study on the Australian-China's challenges and opportunities. And I personally read through the report and gained some new insights through that as well. And I share what Claire just covered, your view on it is the same challenge, and both countries have the same commitments on carbon neutrality. Mine, it's just a slightly different time frame, but given how big that China challenge and the market is, I think it is a very ambitious commitment. And from my most recent visit, I can see the people, the public, the business, the community I work with or talk to, they're all really excited to share that commitment, but also what the opportunity they're going to bring to them. Probably I would point to another recent report before I point to some of the EY report, Anthony, you mentioned. One of the recent report is really on by the Climate Works and CSIRO about to enable that carbon decarbonization and transition. What is a critical enabler? And really the sector I've been working closely with, the renewable energy or energy generation, is going to be the critical enabler in this. And this really highlights this study, as you can see in the screen, about the amount of investment, the coverage from the generation, transmission, and also storage into the whole energy system, going to be critical. And it's really about the question we ask ourselves of what we're going to do, what are the policies, the incentives, the drives, and what are the experiences. And we all pave our ways through, and by exploring those, and between Australia and China, we can work together to get there. While I'll going to move on quickly to the EY reports, but the pathways is really going to need, I think, bold and ambitious movement. And one of that driving is about the inputs into the system, which is the renewable energy capacity and the investment we require into the system. So that's will naturally lead to what many of you on the screen on the webinar may realize, this AEMO's integrated system plan, which just the highlights of what that pathway could look like. But if I look at, based on our sort of the past 20 years historical experience study and analysis of this RSP, which may be subject to review, is the forecast capacity growth in the renewable energy generation is substantial. But do we have that enough demand growth to utilize this generation? That probably poses the question mark whether in the future, could we produce a more asset intensive system? And can we have that utilization optimized? So as an industry practitioner, I probably would ask the opportunity, what are the opportunities to utilize this? And what are the clear and distinctive greenfield global opportunities in the green economy that we could leverage utilizing our comparative advantages? The capital requirements obviously going to be substantial, as the climate works research and all the other market insights we can see. But to the access to those capital and also the cost involved and potentially the price pressure we're going to face, really sort of triggers the question around how do we attract those competitive cost of capital, and how do we address the underlying business needs when people or investors coming into our market? And Claire, just on same observation on the completion of the renewable projects in the recent year, we do find it's challenging. There's no lack of interest from an inbound investor and a capital perspective, but the challenge is really about how do we get the deals done. It's proven to remain to be quite hard, and I think many of those maybe still require some form of policy support or government support. And how do we have more incentives and really attracting those? If I reflect on one of the recent Investment New South Wales roundtable in the renewable energy space, the conversation, it's really briefing us about the net zero plan and also the electricity infrastructure roadmaps and the investment required. The needs is there, and it's really about how do we get there and the policies that's required to get there. I'm probably going to go on to this summary, which is a screenshot from ARECA, which is, as Anthony said, the UI report of renewable energy country attractive analysis. What I really want to point to this is really about what China has done, which, Claire, Anthony, and our previous speakers has done a lot of talking in that. So China has been on the top spots, and the incentives, the efforts, the investments, and the commitment is huge in that market. I kind of absolutely agree with what Peter's opening observation on the electric EV is, because I just returned from a 3.5-week trip from China as well. That certainly is a very noticeable change between this recent visit 2 weeks ago versus pre-COVID. And there's a lot of big people driving EVs already and or talking about getting one. And those on the road on my DD rides, that percentage is really hitting up really high. And then for the provinces I visited in Yunnan or Zhejiang or Jiangsu province, I certainly noticed a lot more days of blue skies than my pre-COVID visits. So I think it does have an impact, noticeable impact already on their efforts. Probably on the note of the global supply chain, which that's a benefit of being the last one to speak of the China's dominance in that clean energy supply chain. I absolutely agree, based on our summaries, that China is really dominating a range of that clean energy supply chain, wind, solar, battery, to some extent critical minerals as well. But I think from what we observe or what we hear of business we work with, they will continue to focus on remaining very competitive in this space. I know there is, globally, there might be shift of where the manufacturing should stay and the security of the supply. That's, a whole different topic perhaps. But I think from China, what we hear is they're going to focus on continue to remain that competitiveness and also retain the dominance in this supply chain, and also targets the export to global markets as well. And all those the carbon markets Claire touched on, we certainly see a large amount of pilot programs on those green electricity or certificates market schemes on the trading, as well as pilot programs on that innovation and technology development in there. So that's where I draw my insights and speaking to my colleagues in China about the developments in that market. So coming back to Australia and China, I think I've already touched on this deeper collaboration required, but really the collaboration needs to be a win-win for both parties and through leveraging the strengths of both. So for our inbound investors, a lot of them, it's about getting their capacity exporters, such as solar or wind or those businesses. It's really about how do we have that investment objectives cleared. And I think a lot of times the hurdles coming to this market could be whether it's a control you're seeking or whether it's a investment commercial return or whether you have the channel and access to a broader international market, and have that earlier communication with regulators or approval, with those approval conditions, etc. Clarified. It's still a little bit challenging, but to get the deals done, I think that's what it takes, and then leverage the local expertise and to integrate with the local market. For the export or the outbound activity, what the topic Anthony asked me to cover is really around what we see. And I certainly want to point to one of the very recent report announced by our Net Zero Center. Similar to Kiwal Medicine, we have this commitment announced as well, even though we're lighting emissions. So other than the business is traditionally strong in the outbound market, I think what our business need to think about is how do we stay competitive and doing business as usual in the old world of what we're already having as an investment and trade, but also think about what would be the area we would get to in the new economy. So hence I would point to this Seizing Australia's Renewable Energy Superpower report that's announced in May. What they talk about is the global shift towards net zero would create a lot of the investment actionable opportunities because our economy is going to double by 2050. But then the people living in the high income countries probably would triple. All this will drive the demand for the goods and services. And in particular, people will like the goods and the services in a climate friendly or environmental friendly way. So, and that just means the demand for the material and the clean energy underpin it going to be significant. So therefore, for the development of this new low emission technologies for industrial processes. We're talking about steel making and all that. If we go back to the traditional iron ore export markets, Anthony and I had an exchange of notes. How do we move in some of the processing chain into Australia, given, how do we make it a green ore, for example, for exporting? That's probably the opportunity we can think about as a nation, because we already have abundant renewable sources to be input into the chain, the ecosystem. And then we have the access of that to utilize that capacity, the overgrowing of the capacity that's budgeted by the market operator. But then it's about how do we utilize those. So that's one of the, sorry, I'm not sure what happened to my screen, but I'll continue anyway.
My fault, sorry.
No, that's all good. So that's one of the area I think worth exploring, but also on the critical minerals, all those the initial processing, is that also the opportunities we should really seize to really make the returns, but also that would add. I think this report, if I caught it right, you would add about $65 billion GDP into the economy by 2050. I think that's one of the Net Zero Center's modeling that's presented to us. And then you're talking about in the real 2021 dollar terms. So the dividends are priced to seize these opportunities are huge, I think, as a nation for us. And it's about our policy requirements, our ambition, and our incentives, and to support the business community to work together, and between the two nations as well to work together to drive that. Probably my last point, which I know the slides is off the screen, is really around the international standards settler board for the climate change related standards. I know it was announced really, it was announced a little while ago, but it's finally published on the 26th of June this year, I remember. But the second day, I think Australia really announced the second consultation very quickly, which really highlights a good implementation and the sequencing of that standardized and also international standards aligned requirement for disclosing these non-financial risk and opportunities in Australia with a focus, because the second standard is really climate related disclosure. So a lot of our Australian business probably will need to start think about need to think about it, but they may be subject to starting implementing this in the 2025. And then on the chapter 2M, which is like the disclosing entities under Corporations Act, who currently prepare and lodge the general purpose financial reports, they will need to apply that climate related disclosure by FY28. So significant amount of work and preparation needs to do it. There's a lot of, I think it's not about just disclosing information, it's about the governance, about the strategy or risk management, and what are your metrics and targets you're going to put out there. And us, and for me personally as assurance practitioner, how do business make the data assurance ready to add the credibility into, because that's what it is about. So I think that itself presents significant opportunity for collaboration as well. So if I look at the whole supply system, because while China hasn't done any the consultation in the early stage, but I think it's already indicated earlier, together with many other Asian countries, about adoption of these two standards. So I think I'm expecting China to be moving very quickly on this. So as a global business or global community of different scopes of emission, the inputs into the system, I think with increased availability of the data, standardized and transparent information on climate impact, probably we can expect from that FY26 onwards. I would imagine the investment, the collaboration going to grow faster and deeper into all aspects of this supply chain. And therefore that really going to accelerate the investment interest and accelerate the collaboration and, all the actions together to tackle this common challenge or common commitment that both countries share. So I'm probably going to stop there. That would be my quick observation.
Fantastic, Lynn, and quite right. I'm sitting up in ASEAN at the moment, and a number of those topic areas were covered off around the need, and this is where Australia, I think, can play a real leadership role in participating in that. The execution of those taxonomies that have been set up now internationally, and positioning ourselves. We talked about it in this green economy leadership role across RCEP. Which includes Korea, Japan, China, and ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand. So there's a real, and then behind that, a couple of the points you made about the investment attraction. I'm seeing a lot of it skimming off Australia, coming into Indonesia, Malaysia. So there's a competitive risk there for Australia if we're not getting ourselves clear. Which then comes back to one of the elephants in the room with the discussion we had with the government around FIRB and defining, which is part of those recommended action items that we set out, was we need a framework. We need to know the clarity of what is allowed and is required, and where we set the governance around that. So thank you again. We're going to run out of time for our panel, but I'm going to ask everyone to come back to, sorry, Li Shi, you're still on as Maggie. And we only got a few minutes. Yeah. So I'm really just going to ask one last wrap-up question to everyone, and I'm going to ignore the first one about collaborations you've experienced and leave it to that second question, which is, if there was one thing that you could begin tomorrow to act on this opportunity for collaboration with China, what would it be? David, I'm going to wheel back and come back to you.
There's no one thing, Anthony, but if while I've got the stage with the foundation on alert there, one thing I'll be starting to write the next application for funding to enable us to activate this, because I think what we've heard today is an extraordinary story. You know, we've had 12 months, 18 months, very short period of time of intense activity, supported by the foundation, some amazing collaborative partners, both in Australia and China. And I think we're just at a point now where
all right, how are you?
we're at a tipping point to take this forward.
Just need you to move, probably Lynn.
We just need to take this forward, and I'll be crafting an application to Peter and his team to bring us all on board and take this forward. That's my one point.
Thank you. Alicia, you're still on with us?
Yes.
What's one thing we could do tomorrow?
Once again, apologize for Maggie's absence. And actually, it's not something we are going to do tomorrow, but it's actually something we have already done. GPIBC has already initiated an event known as the Green Technology Innovation Cup. And this competition is designed to gather clean tech companies from both domestic and international spheres, aiming to collaborate with numerous industrial parks situated in China. And these parks are actively seeking for solutions for their substantial requirements in transitioning to a more environmental friendly and also sustainable practices, as I have already mentioned. And our primary aspiration is that this event serves as a platform fostering connections between Chinese industrial parks and also clean tech from all over the world. The objective is to facilitate meaningful partnerships, catalyze market expansion, and also identify optimal applications for these innovative technologies within the parks. And furthermore, in alignment with our aforementioned goals, that we have organized visits for clean tech company enterprises to the development zones in China. And this initiative involves engaging with local authorities, conducting informative roadshows, and establishing avenues for fruitful collaborations. And we extend a really warm invitation to ACBC and all interested stakeholders to participate in these park tours. And for further information, you're really welcome to contact us.
What's the timing?
Innovation Cup. The Innovation Cup will be launched officially launched in August.
Fantastic. Thank you again for joining us. And Claire, over to you. What's something we could do tomorrow? Report number 2?
Could do report number 2, Anthony. I think that it's along the right lines in terms of, and I think it's what you really started with and David mentioned as well, just helping people actually just, understand the opportunity. And really people's first thought when they're kind of looking at these challenges should be, well, are there opportunities to help solve these problems together? And I think that's anything that's under the climate banner. We will all get there faster if we do it together. There's no point all of us trying to sort of solve the same problems on our own. And so I think it's that first step of, well, how can we collaborate on coming to a solution? I sort of feel if all the steel manufacturers in the world can get together and form a consortium to look at green steel manufacturing, then surely there's hope for everyone else as well.
Great, thank you. And Lynn?
Oh, thanks. Other than what I've been doing every day, I guess, just to give you two new, so I love working with clients and business or people in this sector. But I guess just leveraging, given my expertise by trade, it's really about how do I evolve and train up, upskill my team really to assist our clients and the businesses to implement and transition into the new world of integrated climate-focused disclosure, to be ready for 25, 28 different timelines, time frame of that implementation, and to continue to provide that confidence to the capital markets and investors.
Fantastic, thanks, Lynn. For myself, just before I pass back to David to do a quick wrap, and I'm going to pull together a bit of information around that Green Innovation Cup competition, and start rattling the can in Australia to get some participation, particularly from what we heard on our delegation around the water and waste treatment and a lot of that environmental services area. I think really low-hanging fruit opportunities for Australian companies with the scale of the challenges in China. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you again to Peter and the foundation. Over to you, David, for a bit of a quick close.
Thanks, Anthony, and thank you to all our speakers today. Absolutely fantastic conversation and discussion. It's a shame we didn't have a little bit more panel time, but I think we've all got a lot out of it. I'd just like to thank everyone in particular individually for their commitments to the cause. You know, this is not easy. It takes a lot of passion and it takes time, energy to bring about good results. But I love Lynn's comments at the end about, you know, we've got to spend a bit of time on, you know, bringing our teams with us on this journey, training them to understand what it is that we're talking about. It's very easy to be, you know, 1 or 2 steps ahead of the pack in this space, and we lose attention. So bringing everybody along on board is important, and I think today has played an important part in that. Anthony, I'd particularly like to thank you for your leadership. You know, you were the one that came up with the idea of Green Channel and introduced it to ACBC. It's been an extraordinary journey for the last 18 months. I'm sure that it will continue, perhaps in different ways to the way it's done in the past, but thank you for the leadership there. To all the colleagues within ACBC around Australia, and I know there are a lot listening into this today, thank you for all your support, because this is a team effort. You know, we're a big organisation. We've got 18,000 people signed up to our weekly newsletters around Australia, or monthly newsletters, and who come along to our events. So these are people that are invested in the China relationship, and I think together we can make a huge difference. Peter, to you and your team at the foundation, thank you so much for, you know, again, your leadership and the foundation's, you know, amazing contribution to driving the Australia-China relationship out of some pretty dark times. And I think what we're seeing now is focus in the right areas, and we really appreciate the support around Green Channel. We hope that it generally does continue. And to all our friends on this call, and we've had, I know at one point, well over 100 and nearly 120 people online, which is amazing. Thank you for your ongoing support. We look forward to you coming along to our ACBC events. We have lots of them. And to get real value out of this, join up and join one of our working groups. That's where you get the maximum value out of this. And you see a lot more than what you see just in the public environment. So thanks all very much, and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.